So everybody's very welcome this morning to the launch of our new service supporting adults with eating disorders, which is called REConnect. It's a structured program which we're going to hear all about from Dr. Niamh McNamara. And Niamh is going to be our first speaker. So let me just say a little bit about who Niamh is. Niamh McNamara is a social psychologist and associate professor at Nottingham Trent University in the UK. Her research explores the ways in which the social groups and communities we belong to impact our physical and mental health. She leads the Groups, Identities and Health Research Group at Nottingham Trent University Psychology. So Niamh, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you. This idea came from your head, so I'm looking forward to hearing about that. If you could maybe introduce us to the REConnect program.
Sure. Morning, everyone, and thanks, Harriet, for that introduction. It's really exciting to be here this morning to talk about REConnect. It's something we've been working on for a long time now, so it's really great to finally be here today. So I'll just give a bit of background into where the ideas came for the program. So I've been working with Bodywhys for a long time now. I think Harriet and I started working together in 2012, possibly a little bit earlier. And our first collaboration, as Harriet mentioned, my research looks at the groups and communities we belong to and how that impacts our health. So we were originally did some work with the Connect group that looked at the value of peer support for people who are living with an eating disorder or in recovery from an eating disorder, because it's sometimes one of the aspects that's overlooked in treatment and care, particularly at that time. Anyway, there was a lot of concern around online groups and their appropriateness for people who were in that position. And what we did was we looked at the different dynamics and what was happening in the interactions in the Connect group. And we showed through that piece of research that peer support groups like Connect could help tackle the loneliness and the social isolation that often goes along with an eating disorder, through providing support that people felt were based on a shared understanding, shared sense of identity, and mutual empathy for each other. And that's kind of where we learned that actually, while connecting with peers isn't a treatment as such, it does have a therapeutic effect. So from that point, and we had written that up, so Harriet and I have that out for a while, and it's something we consistently come back to show the value of peer support in that journey. Following that, when I moved over to the UK, we continued our relationship, broadened out the research, and Bodywhys was always a key partner in the work we do at NTU. And we looked at other important social groups, so family, friends, treatment teams. We also had a program of work that looked at stigma and how that can impact support experiences, both formal, so from treatment teams, but also informally as well. And over the last, I suppose, 12 years or so, we've really built up a body of work that shows the importance of social connections for recovery and for living with an eating disorder, and showing that connection between the connections that you have and the relationships that you have and how those can impact people's well-being, including their quality of life, but also we've shown that it's associated with reduced feelings of loneliness, reduced symptoms of depression and anxiety. We also showed that was really important during COVID, and also reduced symptomatology in eating disorders. So we feel that these actually do provide that link between, I suppose, clinical recovery and personal recovery. So we know that supportive relationships are important in recovery, and they're always highlighted in the accounts of people who have gone through that journey consistently. It's also recognised by NICE guidelines as well. So in the NICE guidelines, they do recognise that social support, loneliness, isolation, they really impact the quality of life of someone who's recovering. And they recommend an assessment of social needs, both for carers as well and for people who are in recovery or who are living with an eating disorder. But that's kind of where the guidance stops. There's no evidence-based treatment, no evidence base for peer support as yet in the NICE guidelines. So we're hoping this is kind of one step towards that. We'd seen that we knew we had a good understanding of social connections from all our work. Well, this COVID kind of derailed us a little bit, I think, because we were supposed to do this a few years ago, but we did manage to get some funding. In 2023, we had Bodywhys come over to us in Nottingham. I'm also working with a fantastic partner here as well, First Step CD, who are a Midlands-based charity in the UK. And we ran a dissemination event where we invited some clinicians from the NHS. So we had 10 NHS trusts come along to our event. We talked about our research. Harriet and Kathy very kindly came over and talked about the support that Bodywhys provides. And we had colleagues from First Step CD as well, talking about their support services. We had a parent and we had people who had lived experience, who also talked about the role of social support in their journeys. It went down really well, which was nice to see. It's always good when people tell you what you're doing is useful. A lot of the NHS trusts were telling us that they were very interested in it, that actually challenged their ideas about groups and what they can do for people in recovery. And they would disseminate this information to their teams. And that got us thinking that, well, what will they disseminate and how could we help them with that? So our next step in the process was to get some additional funding and have a series of events in Nottingham and in Dublin, talking with our partners, with Bodywhys, with First Steps. We also included BEAT at that point. So BEAT are the UK's national charity, national support organisation. And we had different professionals, including occupational therapists, but also peer support workers, as well as people with lived experience. And we spent about a year with different events talking about initially a toolkit. So we thought we'll just write a piece and we'll circulate it. But I suppose our partners challenged us to be a lot more ambitious, and then REConnect was born, which is exciting, but it was a lot of work. So we're really glad that we've come to that point. We then spent another, I suppose, 12 months thinking about the format, what would make it feel inclusive, what was the best way to run it, what kind of topics should we have. We've informed that with our own research, but we've also had people inputting into it the whole time to make sure that we obviously have a very good sense of it from the research, but we also want to know what works best for people who might be participants there. And yeah, I suppose the last step then was to develop the content, which I'll speak about later on in this session, and give people a sense of what actually is in REConnect. But yeah, we're just really excited. We're looking forward to training our facilitators shortly and getting everything up and running. So I hope, Harriet, that gives a general indication of where we're at.
It absolutely does, Niamh. And I suppose what the REConnect programme is looking at is really exploring the social connections and the importance of that in recovery. When you think, gosh, when you lay it out like that and you think where we've come from, I still remember your initial email about doing that piece of research on our Connect groups and how exciting that was. And yes, there was that feeling around that time that online groups were something maybe to be cautious about and be a bit afraid of. And to see, I remember the reading, the results and seeing the value of it. It really kind of consolidated our thinking around that. Thank you so much. That's given us a real sense of, I suppose, the depth of work and research and thinking that has brought us to this point. So I really appreciate that. So maybe we'll turn to Kathy Downs. Kathy joined Bodywhys in 2017. She is the support services manager here at Bodywhys. So Kathy oversees all of our volunteers and all of our support services. Kathy is an accredited psychotherapist and supervisor. She works with children, adolescents, and young adults. She's also the seminar lead and regular teacher on the TCD, MSc in Psychoanalytic Psychotherapy, and she's also taught on UCD's Art Psychotherapy Masters and Trinity's MPhil. So Kathy, I'll come to you now, and maybe you'd talk us a little bit around our involvement and our role in bringing the REConnect program to life.
Thanks, Harriet, and thanks, Niamh. Well, I suppose I oversee the support services in Bodywhys, and part of those services are that we have online groups. So we've already got form, when we think about introducing this social connections group. Our groups are a chat group, and we also have a virtual group. So our virtual groups are one that's inclusive of all eating disorders, and then we've another one that's specific to binge eating disorder. So we have an ethos in all our services that is underlined in the groups too, in that it's non-directive support. So I suppose we might think about it being the aim is to bring people together to discuss and connect around the underlying feelings and the thought patterns that sit underneath the behaviours of their eating disorder. Niamh has mentioned our involvement, and obviously Niamh's involvement with Bodywhys goes back a long time. We first kind of thought about, I suppose, social connections specifically back in June 2023 when Niamh asked us to come to Nottingham. She brought together like different health professionals and different UK support organisations like ourselves for eating disorders. And we were able to speak about our services there. And we were also able to listen to others and discuss with others the value of peer support within ED care and recovery. I see our groups as being about social connections and peer support because they're people coming together who are experiencing an eating disorder, different eating disorders. And I suppose I'm going to quote an anonymous service user who gave us some feedback from the virtual groups. And they said, I really appreciate having a safe place to connect. And there's something very important for me in the word safe, thinking about, maybe preconceptions of other people in the past around people with eating disorder in groups. It might be a kind of a negative space. We're very careful to make it a safe space, and we'll do the same with this structured group. So I suppose while the groups themselves might not always focus on maybe managing social groupings in the world and recovery, there's definitely, it definitely comes up all the time, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But for me, in some sense, our groups they embody people connecting socially, because by the very nature of being in a group, that's what you're doing, and that's not always easy. You're also kind of working yourself out in a group and who you are. In general, I suppose the feedback I get from our trained facilitators is that participants come together and they talk to each other about what's going on for them. They offer each other support and compassion, and in turn they receive it. So in a way, this structured support group was a natural progression for us from that. We already have in place more structured supports for families. So we have our pillar program, and we also have, following on from that, the Maudsley carers groups, and they're both hugely successful. And when you think about those groups, particularly the Maudsley, there's a real sense of kind of practice and thinking about skills and building on those skills as the weeks go on. And I think that's hugely beneficial for the families that are involved in them. Harriet, you'll be able to speak more about that. So in a way, for us and for my side of the services, to be able to offer that to people with self-experience is hugely important. I suppose another reason I think it's an excellent fit for us is that we have in the past, we've looked for feedback from our Connect users and our participants in the virtual group. And people have come back to us and said, we'd like something a bit more structured or practical. Sometimes it'd be useful, they've said, if we could have a topic that we could focus on in the group for the session, or if there's conversation started. So people are really thinking about wanting something that's a little bit more practical that they can kind of bring back into their social lives. Another reason I think it's a wonderful fit for us is that, and the facilitators will speak to this far better than I can, is that repeatedly themes come up for discussion in our virtual groups and in Connect around the social aspects of recovery and managing them and thinking about them. So to give you a few examples of that, that might be, you know, people being in the world and having to deal with other people's preconceptions of an eating disorder, of their eating disorder, managing misunderstandings. A lot of the time there's conversation around whether it feels safe enough to disclose my eating disorder to somebody or not, or to who might I disclose it and who I might not have to disclose it to. There can be discussion around trying to manage being in a friend group, you know, so for example, what's it like to be in a friend group and sitting at lunch and people focusing on their own body image or food issues. And people bring these topics to try and think about them with other people who might share a similar identity to them, and that can be hugely beneficial. People talk about family relationships a lot, not feeling understood, or friendships, the good ones or the more challenging ones. I think certainly in the world today, we talk an awful lot about boundaries, don't we? Boundaries are kind of bandied around a bit, but boundaries come up all the time in our groups, you know, and how to manage them. I will say, I think one of the useful things about our groups and this structured group as well, that actually sometimes before you manage your boundaries, you have to work out what they are. And maybe perhaps in eating disorder and eating disorder recovery, boundaries can get a little bit fuzzy around the edges. And so having a place to be able to think practically about what you want and what you don't want, I think will be a wonderful thing that we may be able to offer to our service users. I suppose finally, one of the things that I think we address in our groups is loneliness, and the loneliness of an eating disorder and the isolation that it can demand of a person, and then how you take a step out of that back into the world and leave that isolation, but also kind of manage the feelings of loneliness. And Niamh has opened up all those topics in these 6-week sessions and explored them. And you know that there's lots talking through the different aspects of them, and also then there's lots of activities to think about them practically, which I think is a wonderful thing. So I'm really delighted that this is an addition and an add-on to what we do. So I think I'll leave it at that, Harriet, if that's okay.
Fantastic, Kathy. It's really lovely to hear that insight into the groups that we have been running for such a long time. And it's really fantastic to hear how, you know, in your head anyway, this REConnect group, this new service, is a natural progression for us, and that it will be, and that it is answering a need. And I know certainly when I do pillar, I often get the question, but is there a pillar for the person with the eating disorder? And I think what's being asked there is there something that's structured and safe that the person who's going through it can attend and be held through it? Because there's that sense of, you know, when people come to Pillar and come to the Maudsley, there's a sense of we're holding you for this time that we have together. And there's a real sense of safety and security in that. And that shared experience is so important. And I think absolutely that when carers come to those groups, they're then immediately thinking, I want my person to have this experience. It would be really helpful for their recovery. So thank you so much for describing it as you have. It's really lovely to hear it. So, okay, so now I'm going to come to Emmy Snellgrove. So Emmy is from Meath. She's a member of the Bodywhys media panel, and people might remember her from last year. We did an absolutely gorgeous webinar with Emmy and other people around recovery and the meaning of recovery from an eating disorder. Emmy loves writing about her experiences in recovery, especially with the aim of spreading awareness and a sense of hope. And I certainly carried, Emmy, what you said last year, you know, that really sustained me in my work for a long time. So I'm really grateful for that. And Emmy also advocates for full recovery from any eating disorder is something that is possible and that she's really, really passionate about. So Emmy, I'm going to ask you now to speak about, you know, what your thoughts are on the value of social connections for recovery or discovery or whatever word we want to use from an eating disorder.
Okay, thank you so much, Harriet, and hi everybody. As Harriet said, my name's Emmy. I live in Meath. Just for a bit of backstory, my story kind of begins nearly 20 years ago now. I became ill at the age of 12, and in order to sustain the eating disorder, I kept it secret from everybody. I was kind of like, I started at the time when social connections, I suppose, were really important, making friends and all that. I started to isolate myself and kind of withdraw from the world because the eating disorder became what only mattered. So I was kind of in many years that dragged on. I was oblivious to how unwell I was. And I think there came the time when I finally acknowledged it, and that was the beginning of my recovery journey. I did go to hospital for a bit, didn't really help. I still didn't really have the kind of inner motivation to recover at the time. I was just recovering for my parents, really, because I knew they were really worried, and just kind of going through the motions. Now, a few years after hospital, I was just going through kind of series of relapse and kind of putting on the weight without really wanting to. But there did come a time when I actually realized I wanted to recover for myself. And yeah, I think that's when I found I really wanted to commit to real recovery. Didn't really know where to begin, but begin I did. And I think I look at that time, and of course, a lot of the strength. I had a lot of. I suppose there was strength in me that I drew upon, and that inner motivation that got me far. But looking back on that time in the light of what we've been talking about today, I kind of think, wow, the social connections that I had and that I formed kind of in my recovery journey, they were really, really important. And I'm going to talk a bit about that. I think so. I think it all started when it's a funny little story. So as I say, before light recovery, I was very lonely, very isolated. The friends I had kind of drifted away, or they were there, but I kind of was afraid to reach out to them. Um, and I after uni, I actually went. It was so random. I was walking for Trinity, and I saw on a notice board. It was an ad for summer camp teachers in Barcelona, And I was, I can't do that. Like, why am I even looking at this? But there was this little part of me that was like, why not apply for it? And I got it. So yeah, that I went to Barcelona for the summer, and it was absolutely amazing. I kind of, and it was wonderful because I think this was the beginning of me forming social connections and finding myself. And I think it was just incredible because I met people there, and I worked with the loveliest kids there, and just this combination of um, I guess socially connecting amongst people my own age, and people who were older than me and people who were younger than me, and the children, of course. They were amazing. And all these social connections I formed, it sort of made me think, well, do you know what? I'm actually not the boring person that I thought I was. I'm actually, people like me here, and they value my contribution to being here. And it was just, I think it was really, really good for my self-esteem, because that was something I struggled with a lot in my, and kind of I'm not saying it triggered my illness, but it definitely was all part of it. And so yeah, I think that was really, really important. And it was kind of the beginning, I suppose, of um the kind of rediscovering myself, socially connecting with others, having the confidence to socially connect with others. I kind of like, I think there's four things that I can say why social connections are really important in recovery. The first one I would say is the social connections we form, they kind of they let us picture a world without the eating disorder, a life without the eating disorder. And that's really, really important, because we kind of, when someone has an eating disorder, it just consumes their whole life, and you can't, like, thinking of a life without it is really, really difficult. And it just reduces your life to a sequence of rituals, really, and you're just doing the same thing every day, and you're not really living. And I think as well, you're kind of, the thought patterns, you get so deeply stuck in them, and you can't really imagine anything else. And I think forming social connections is wonderful, in the sense that I think you kind of, when you connect with people again, they make you see a lot what it can be like not to have an eating disorder. I think, and just to kind of like, I think when for example, when I was in Barcelona, like I think I was beginning to see what life can be like. I did things I'd never done before. Like, I went rock climbing with the children, and we went to Barcelona for the day and saw the city. Yeah, and that was just really amazing, and it kind of made me like look at the world in a different way and think, well, you know what, my life actually could be like this. And that was a very exciting and fundamental thought, and one I'd never had before. Um, I think as well, social connections, they they kind of, the people you meet and the friendships you have, and I know, as I say, it can be hard, because when you have an eating disorder, you can lose touch with your friends. But what I would say to you is that the true friends never leave you. They might just be not sure what you're going through, or unable to fully understand. And it is hard to fully understand unless you have an eating disorder, but that doesn't mean that they don't care for you, that they're kind of I think reaching out is important and saying, look, I'm struggling with this, and I know you might not fully, I know you can't fully understand what I'm going through, but can we still spend time together? And that was really important, I think, for me to do, to kind of grasp that not everyone was going to get it. Now, some people do get it, and I think one thing I learned in recovery is you have to kind of understand that some friends are very, very good with emotions, and they're probably the ones that you will have in your very kind of trusted support, not even trusted, but your main support circle. And I think that's one really amazing thing about social connections. You kind of make your own personalized support circle, and they provide, in my recovery anyway, that kind of, they provide you with a kind of support that I don't think a treatment team can provide, because it's very personalized, and it's, you know, that they care about you, and that is really important. And I think having someone there who, like if I did something scary, just being able to message and be like, oh, I ate a bagel, and we're like, why, well done. That was amazing. And yeah, that kind of being able to share victories together and knowing someone was cheering you on, that was really, really important for me. So yeah, now I also think this was really important for me as well. I kind of, having an eating disorder, I lost touch with who I was, and my true identity was just so, I suppose, it had been stifled, and instead there was this really tense, irritable, nervous person. I'm not any of that naturally, but that is what the disorder does. It kind of it seems to replace your identity. And when I guess started recovering, I felt a great sense of emptiness, because I thought, gosh, like there's so little of me left. Like the task I face is enormous. It's like, and I don't even know if I want to recover for myself, because I'm such a boring and intimidated person. Now, and that's kind of, I look at that now and think, well, the social connections I formed were really, really important in me overcoming that and finding myself again. Now, if I look at Barcelona, and I think Barcelona was the first time I worked with children, and it kind of it made me rediscover my values, I suppose, and my qualities as a person and my interests. And that kind of made me think, you know what, I love working with children. I want to, I guess, maybe look into doing this for the future, because this is something I really like. And when I got home, I kind of continued to work with children. And this kind of, I think it's just, so I guess with staying in the sector, I made more friends. I met some wonderful colleagues who I learned from, and all of this kind of, it made me reconnect with the values I'd lost, and it just was really important in me forming my identity again, and making me realize I'm not any of what my eating disorder said, and that identity, the kind, caring person who will do anything for the kids that she looks after, like she was there all along. And I think as well, around this time was the time I started to kind of nervously, very, very nervously, starting to socialize again, which was really, really hard. But I took it slowly. I was like, okay, I'll go for a coffee for an hour, and then next week we'll see if we can go for dinner for an hour or two with a close friend. And so just kind of doing I think it's called graded exposure, that tool, but kind of building upon the challenges. That was really important. And yeah, and again, also around this time, I met my boyfriend and started, I suppose, traveling with him a bit, and it all kind of contributed to this the first point I made about kind of seeing that what a life without an eating disorder can be like. And yeah, it was really, really very important time. And I think I suppose I got to meet his friends, and more friendships were forming through work, and my guess my husband, sorry, he is my husband now. He was my boyfriend back then. Meeting his friends and also reconnecting with my old friends, and then starting to socialize within their social circles. It was all kind of contributing to this, I suppose, journey. And this kind of also, I think it reminded me of who I really was, because I started to grasp that people actually like spending time with me, and I like spending time with people, and that I was an extrovert. And all of that had been suppressed. And it was just wonderful to kind of see the real person that was me emerge. The final point I wanted to make was, I think as well, one thing, and this is really important. I think this really testifies the importance of social connections. I think they kind of help us break free from the kind of the thought patterns of the eating disorder, essentially, which I guess are they're often a bit like depression sometimes. Like that, life is, your head is a very hard place to be, and there's no hope, and everything is kind of, you look in the world and there's no light, there's no hope, and that kind of contributes to the sense of loneliness you feel, I suppose. And I think social connections, reconnecting with others, they can help draw a person out of that. It was definitely the case for me, because as I say, my world had got so small. I couldn't think about anything but the eating disorder and sustaining it. But reconnecting again, it kind of helped draw me out of that. And I think through the interactions I had and the experiences I had over the years in my recovery, it just kind of made me think, you know what, like, life is very short, it's very precious. And I actually, I kind of started to slowly grasp that and think, do I really want to spend my whole life like this? Isn't there so much more to life? And it was just, it was through big and little experiences, like talking to my colleagues about their children, and seeing that love, I suppose, or talking to someone about the loss of a loved one, all those kind of glimpses of life. And then the bigger experiences, like traveling, I suppose, or I guess going places with friends, going to Emerald Park with my friends, it always makes me think, oh my gosh, life is great. So doing things that you love, it all kind of, I think it just helped. There's a major kind of shift in the way I thought about the world and life. And yeah, like it really motivated me. And it's hard to, I think it's really hard to grasp that when you're in the depths of it. And that's why I always say you kind of have to fake it till you make it. You have to start and tell yourself that, even if you don't believe it. And in kind of going out into the world and connecting with others, sometimes for me anyway, I was kind of almost not swept away, but kind of I was gradually kind of, I guess, brought round to the way that, and just being around people who were I suppose had a more positive view on life, and or not even that, just who I guess knew what really mattered. They kind of brought me around to that way of thinking. So yes, that's kind of that's kind of my thoughts on the importance of social connections. That I hope that made sense. But yeah.
Thank you, Emmy. That made an awful lot of sense. I took a couple of notes on things that stood out to me. The first, I suppose, was what you described not having that inner motivation, and I think for anyone who's watching who's a supporter of someone with an eating disorder, that's always the dilemma: is how do we create that inner motivation? And I guess that motivation kind of has to be there. Like you have to want it. And I suppose what I'm hearing, when you say, and I love that you use the word reconnect, but the value of the social connections, it really describes, what I always say about recovery, and that is that you have to live your recovery. So it's not that you get better and then you start to do all these things. You have to do all of these things in order to start really living your own life and letting go of the eating disorder. And part of that, I think I heard you say, that connecting with the world allows you to picture a world that doesn't have the eating disorder in it, and it allows you to picture maybe your life with less of the eating disorder, or without the eating disorder in it. That the value of your friendships and kind of creating that personalized social circle or support circle is part of that, but it's part of really being part of the world, isn't it? And being part of your life and really living your life. And this sense of and this came out in the Connect research that we did with Neve way back when. That first piece of research was that idea of the identity shift that happens as somebody recovers from an eating disorder. And Neve, I think I'm remembering it correctly, that the people who attended the support groups were able to identify themselves as somebody trying to recover from an eating disorder, rather than having the identity of somebody with an eating disorder, that there was that recovery identity there. And Emmy, you spoke about that sense maybe of emptiness at first, when you no longer maybe totally identify as a person with an eating disorder. It's like, well, who am I then? And I always remember a story that somebody told me who was kind of in that moment in their recovery. And they were, they had their life had kind of stopped because of their eating disorder. They weren't kind of working, and they hadn't gone back to study yet, and they were in that kind of limbo bit. And they were going out to a pub to meet a pile of friends, a wider circle maybe, and terrified of that kind of social interaction and people saying, oh, how are you? What are you doing? And not knowing, what do I say? What am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not doing anything. And they went and they got through it, and they came home, and they told me that when they got home, the Late Late was on, and Spike Milligan was on the Late Late. And Gay Byrne said to him, so what do you say when people ask you, what do you do? And he said, I say I do my best. And it was, it's a lovely story, but it kind of captures that, the difficulty of re-entering the world when you've been in the eating disorder world in your head. And that's the compassionate bit as well, isn't it? That it's okay not to know who you are yet, and it's okay to explore, well, what do I like? What are the things that give me joy? What are the things that make me tick? Like, what are the things I don't like? It's all an exploration. And I think the REConnect program is going to allow a bit of space for the exploration of that without needing to even, you know, at the end of it, have a plan or know what to do. It's just a space for that. And then, yeah, and all of that, then the changing in the thought patterns. So you've really captured so much in that, Emmy. Thank you so much for talking to us about that. You really painted a very helpful picture in terms of the value of social connection for recovering from an eating disorder. We appreciate it. Thank you.
No bother.
Niamh, so I might come to you now and ask you to talk us through the program and maybe give us a little glimpse at it, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure, that'd be great. I think Niamh might have the slides there. So I'll just talk through pretty quickly what we'll be doing with that. So REConnect itself is, I think as we were mentioning, it's a 6-week program. We are going to be holding them, I think it's Wednesday evenings, so they last for 2 hours. And it's a kind of combination of, I suppose, a little bit of psychoeducation, but a lot of discussion and a lot of talking about, you know, the things that are on people's minds in relation to the topic of that week. So all the information will be on the Bodywhys website in terms of, you know, how to register and things like that. But just what I'm going to do today really is just talk through what will you actually be doing, because there's only so much information you can put on the webpage. So firstly, I want to kind of talk about what are the key principles that are underpinning the program, so kind of the ethos of the group. And I think it's very similar to what Kathy has already mentioned. So firstly, we really want this to be a positive and supportive group experience for everybody, because that's what the research is telling us is the key thing to help people. So for everybody who attends, we do start off with, every group will be kind of tailored to the people who are there. So it's going to be around about 8 to 10 people at most in the group. So it's a nice supportive space. We'll have initial discussions around, you know, group guidelines. That will be very familiar to people who've been with other Bodywhys groups. But we'll also talk about what that idea of recovery is for people, because it's such a challenging word sometimes for everyone. We want to make sure that's a very inclusive space for anybody, no matter what stage you're at and thinking about reclaiming your life from an eating disorder. So every group will have a sense of what's helpful for them and want to keep that space really safe and inclusive. Our main thing though is, I think as Harriet mentioned as well, it's just be curious. So REConnect isn't for forming goals, setting goals, putting pressure on yourself. It's just about showing up and talking about these issues with other people. So we value very much people thinking about and discussing their social connections. There's no expectation, there's no kind of sense of achievement or goals that you have to have accomplished by the end of the program. It's just about going to that group as well, is building your connections in and of itself. It's not something that starts at the end of the program. It's something that happens from day one. And I suppose we had done a piece of work with Bodywhys a couple of years ago where we looked at eating disorder services in Ireland across the board. And we had one participant who regularly used support services like Bodywhys say that what happens there is that it gave her a space to practice the risk of taking care of herself. So it might be very different, as Emmy was mentioning, it might be very different to other settings where you just give them that space to think, to talk about, you know, what's self-care for you. What will be that that space where you can think about, you know, what is it that I need? How do I practice that risk in that safe and supportive space? So we're very clear, it's not a treatment group, it's not a therapy group, but that in and of itself, that space, that safe supportive space can have a therapeutic effect. Okay, so those are our kind of key principles. Just go on now to talk about the actual program sessions themselves. So like I say, we have six different topics. Each week, everyone will be talking about this particular topic related to social connections that the facilitators will guide you through. All of them are informed by both the research we do, but also those kind of discussions and meetings and all those different events that help to inform the format as well. There are some kind of activities and exercises. These range from individual reflection. So we give you some kind of questions and exercises to think about for yourself. Also some small group discussions. So there'll be breakout rooms where the group will break up into much smaller groups. Facilitators won't be in those breakout rooms. So it's just a space for people to talk to themselves. And then sometimes there'll be kind of larger group discussions as well. We also have, everyone will get what we call a participant journal. So you'll have your own journal where you can kind of jot down anything, any kind of key takeaways that you have from each session. There'll be some space to write down anything related to the activities you've taken part in. It's to use as you wish. You will get it. If you don't want to use it, if it's something that doesn't appeal to you, that's absolutely fine. Sometimes people like to have things like that. That's okay too. You'll be building up kind of a bunch of personalized resources. So we will have kind of some slides in the sessions that we create in sessions that are, I suppose, unique to the group that are taking part there, with what they've talked about, with strategies they've come up with. So you'll get those as well. So you can really build up something for yourself to keep after the program is finished. So that could be something that you might come back to afterwards to kind of remind yourself of those key things you learned about yourself and about your group. So I'll go through kind of the program sessions very briefly now. So it's a very gradual, because we know that this kind of thing is challenging. So it's a very gradual work through topics related to social connections. So that, like I say, the facilitators will guide you through it. We start off in session 1, where the group gets to know each other. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we really want the REConnect group to be that first safe space where you do start making those connections with people who understand where you're coming from. And the first session is very much about the group getting to know each other. You'll meet together for 6 weeks and do a lot of work together. So it's important that we establish those relationships initially. In that session as well, we learn about the health benefits of social connections and explore what your social connections look like for you now. So we talk you through maybe what groups you belong to, what role they play in your life, what role that you would like them to play in the future. And also think about, how they can help you reclaim your life. That can be a challenging thing to do, but I suppose we always say to people that this is what it looks like now. We're here to help you think about and help you discover what it might look like in the future as well. And that's something that REConnect is designed to do. From that, then we continue in session 2, where we talk about issues of loneliness, but we also start thinking about those small moments of connection that we mentioned. We don't jump straight into saying you have to build up all these new connections. We just think about small moments in everyday life that can make you feel connected, like saying hello to a neighbor, or just being out walking your dog, whatever it might be. So we think about those very small steps to reconnect with the world. I think one of the key things that we do then comes into the next session. So when we start talking about taking control of your story. So if we go, yeah. So this is part of our session 3. And it really is where we talk to people about disclosing your eating disorder to other people or not. Because there's lots of different ways to think about that. And you shouldn't feel under pressure to decide, for everybody to know like what you're doing and what's happening now and how you are. So we discuss different ways of taking control of your story, because it is your story when you're thinking about reclaiming a life from an eating disorder. And the first thing we do, a little bit like Kathy was saying about, we talk about boundaries, but whenever we think about, well, what are my boundaries? We talk about support. We mentioned support a lot this session this morning, but we ask people to think about what support do you need? What's important for you right now? It might change in the future and that's okay. but what do you need right now and who might you get it from? And that's where we talk about finding your allies. Who are those people who know about, I suppose, the struggles or the challenges that you're having, and who will celebrate those small moments of triumph, as Emmy was talking about earlier. Who are those people who will be there with you? We also talk about as well, are there any gaps? Do you maybe need to find some new allies, and how might we do that, and how do we navigate that? The second part of taking control of your own story then is thinking about, well, I do speak about this, but others are consistently unsupportive and unhelpful. There's two aspects to that. It might be that they just don't understand it, but there might be some that are just not really helpful for you right now. And we talk about what that might look like for you and how to create those social boundaries. And then the final aspect we talk about is choosing not to tell, because maybe you're in a sphere that particular group or relationships don't need to know that you're moving beyond that eating disorder. You are in that process of rediscovering yourself. And it's okay not to have to tell. It's okay to choose to keep that to yourself and not having to go through everything with everybody, that you might just want to be yourself in that moment with that group. And that's fine too. And that's how you move beyond that eating disorder world. So once we have a sense of, what our support needs are, and how we want to take control of our story, we move to the sort of sessions 4 and 5, which are more about looking at those two separate ideas of finding your own allies, building your social connections. So if we move on to the next slide. So the first session 4 about, who are your allies, who are those people who are going to be part of your support network. So in order to protect our own well-being during recovery, we have to think about how do we identify and articulate to other people what form of support we need in that moment and why. And that's really what we mean by building up those social boundaries. Sometimes they're also needed with people who want to offer us support because, as we mentioned, sometimes there can be misunderstandings about what is the right support and what is well-intentioned but maybe not very helpful at that moment, and having the confidence and belief in yourself and what you need to be able to articulate that. So we talk through kind of situations and what boundaries look like and how we might set them up. We also, though, in this, explore with people to think about what impact the different relationships they have or are having on their life and their health and well-being at the moment. So there might be some particular relationships that we feel very strongly attached to, but maybe aren't ultimately that helpful for us right now. So we're not directive in this program. We don't tell people which are the good groups and which are the bad groups. We just think about, or we let people reflect for themselves. We don't ask you to report back. We just say, have a think about the different groups you're in, what impact are they having? Are there some that maybe are not that helpful? And it's difficult to walk away from those, but how do we think about what we might need to do as a form of self-care and for our own health and well-being? We then, in session 5, think about that idea of identity and rediscovering who you are. Now, of course, your allies and your support network will also be an important part of your identity, because anytime you go through a big life change like this, we're not asking you to build up a completely new person. Holding on to those connections that are important to you will give you that sense of continuity during this change and during this big transition. And they're important to hold on to. But also there'll be aspects of you that you might want to rediscover. What are your values? What are your interests? And what groups and communities might fit with that and might give you that support and safe space outside the REConnect group to learn more about yourself. So we talk about what this might look like for people in the group. We also talk about the benefits of having diverse social connections. So while we talked a lot about the loneliness and isolation that often accompanies an eating disorder, sometimes as well, when we start to reclaim our life, our support networks can also be very much focused again on the eating disorders, maybe part of treatment teams or therapy groups, but we want to make sure that we're expanding when it's appropriate for the person. And we're thinking about lots of different types of groups because they can give us different perspectives on life and different insights into what the world is beyond where we are right now. And they can also help us have a kind of flexibility in thinking that having lots of the same types of groups don't really help us with. But we know that this is challenging. And we know that people often have very core beliefs or maybe negative experiences that can act as barriers to engaging with new people and new groups. So we talk through that in session 5, and we talk about what those core beliefs might be, how we might reframe them, and also how we might deal with challenging social situations. So the reality is sometimes we try new things and they don't work out so well for us, but how do we cope with that? And that's an important part of connecting as well. And then I suppose that brings us then to the final session, which is kind of the reflections and bringing everything together. And I suppose the important aspect of this is that the REConnect group itself is where it all starts. It's not that you have to finish those 6 weeks and then you're ready to reconnect. You've actually been doing that the whole way through the program. We talk about how to maybe use the resources that we've been building up through the program, what you might like to do with it, how to think about, okay, well, what follow-up supports might you need? And then we've got some kind of activities there for the group themselves to kind of create mementos of their times together, so you can keep that and add that to your journal. So that's a kind of whistle-stop tour of the session content. I hope that gives an insight and to give people just a further taster of what they can expect if they join the group. So I'll hand back to you there, Harriet.
Thanks, Niamh. That's really great to get that, insight to see what the program will actually be about, what the content is, and how all of those sessions will work. And I suppose that is the idea of the structured program, is that there's a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of information and slides, and then it's really about being able to explore those ideas within the group with the other participants in the group. And I really love the idea of the ethos being one of curiosity, that it's not about goal setting and getting to something at the end. It's about taking part and, just being there and being involved. So I love that idea of it. I think it's very helpful. So I hope everybody has now a good idea of what this new service REConnect is, what the program is. As we said, we're hoping to get between 8 and 10 participants in the group. We will start running the first group in a couple of weeks. I forget the date, but it's starting
the 19th of March.
Okay, so
and it'll run up till the 23rd of April.
Great. So every Wednesday evening,
7
7
p.m.
to 9.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay, so we have time for some questions. We'll probably finish early unless there's buckets of questions, but we did have a very good question already. And it's an important question for people who are considering whether to sign up for the program or not. And that is, if we're using breakout rooms for discussions, and those breakout rooms will not have, so there are 2 facilitators there facilitating the group, but they won't be in the breakout rooms. How are we going to manage to ensure that people don't talk about triggering things in those little groups? And I suppose, Kathy, would you like to maybe just talk us through your answer there?
So I think it's a really good question, actually, and these are all the little points that we need to really think through to make it a safe space. As Niamh mentioned, in the first session, the whole group will come together and discuss the parameters of the group. What's okay to talk about, maybe what's not okay, how to keep the group safe, and what safety means to each individual. And I'm hoping that will be followed through in the breakout rooms, because it's been discussed and I suppose described by the participants themselves. I think perhaps then, before the breakout rooms, that there might need to be a reminder of the facilitators of those parameters, dare I say, rules again, so that people go into the breakout rooms with them fresh in their minds. If perhaps there is a participant who finds it very, very difficult to manage those rules and do find themselves stepping outside it, then we will have to think about whether they're suitable to be in the group, or there needs to be maybe a way where, if you are feeling vulnerable with somebody, that you bring it to the facilitators straight after, and we talk through it and we think about how we manage that. I don't know, Niamh or Harriet, if you've anything else to add to that.
I think as well the breakout rooms also are task focused. So obviously that doesn't preclude people having a chat about other things, but it's time limited and it's task focused. So I think that also adds something else there. But I think it's really important as well, I suppose, for people who want to sign up to we've had a sense of what the content will be. I suppose as well as to think about for yourself whether this is something that's helpful for you now as well, because that'll be for each person as well to decide. It's an opt-in service, but it's about thinking about where you're at and if these kind of discussions are going to be okay for you as well.
Yeah, it's a good point, because there's lots of practicalities. There's lots of talking with your camera on, being in groups, thinking about very particular things. So it's about your own readiness for that as well.
Yeah. And the cameras will need to be on, and you'll need to be in a place where you can share and talk in confidence and feel safe as well. So it's not like a webinar group where you'll just be listening in. You have to be able to kind of participate in a private space and have your camera on.
To get the richness of it, to get the benefit of it, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder, are there any other questions? Oh, there's one there, is there? Yes, we are recording the webinar. So we're going to put this webinar up on the REConnect page, so that for anyone who's interested in it. Can you be quite unwell to join? Kathy, do you want to think about that?
I suppose we've always envisaged this group as a place where people at all points of an eating disorder can be a member or participant, and with different eating disorders. So the part of that one might have to think about, or a person, is their own sense of readiness or wellness to be in a group like this. So in a way, that's not really for us to decide if we leave a group open to all stages of eating disorder or eating disorder recovery. But I do think there are parts of the program that, as we say, do require discussion, practicality, being in a group. So it is about each person thinking individually, well, am I feeling well enough? And I'm not thinking about eating disorder well enough, whatever that might mean, but am I ready enough to actually be in a group like this and follow through on it?
Yeah. So it wouldn't really be for us to say, well, this is the point, if you're well enough. The person themselves has to feel that they would be well enough to sit in the group for the 2 hours, have the camera on, and be able to speak and join the discussion. And I mean, that doesn't mean be able to be like the life and soul of the discussion.
No.
Not at all. But even silence you need to be able to be part of the discussion. So that's for the person more to decide. Pauline has a question as well about the age profile. And Pauline, I suppose it's for adults who have an eating disorder, so it's not for teenagers. You have to be over 18 to join it. And we don't know the age profile of who will be there. So we can't predict that. I suppose, what's the kind of age profile that comes to our other groups, Kathy?
It's very varied, really. I mean, obviously the adult groups, they're all over 18, but There can be people in their 20s or people in their 40s or 50s. It's quite varied and different each week, you know. And this group will be different to that because it'll be the same people each week.
I think as well in our research we see that variation as well. So usually the research is based on the average age is kind of 30-ish. So we almost see people up to 60s. So what we're talking about here, I think, is applicable across a wide range of ages.
Yeah. Jill has a question. Are cameras on going to be strict in order to create a safe place? As I know this has been brought up in other virtual groups, and it was mentioned in the group, if you're not ready to be virtual in the group, there are other groups in Bodywhys not virtual. Yeah, so cameras on is you have, you know, a requirement is that you have your camera on, because everybody will be in the same boat and have their cameras on. There are obviously different groups in Bodywhys. Some of them you don't need to have your camera on, but in the virtual groups, we ask that you have your camera on. Do you agree, Kathy and Neve? Yeah.
Yes, I do. And again, I think sometimes rules just feel like they're rules and they're just there for no reason, but it's there to keep everybody in the same place. And it might be a different experience for somebody who has their camera on to be talking to somebody who has their camera off. That might just feel like something different, and vice versa. And sometimes I do appreciate it's really hard to put your camera on. You really don't want to, and I think we've all been there. But I do think actually the more we can kind of adhere to that, the better the space will be for everybody. And it is about social connections, and part of that is about a kind of a showing up, even if it's a little bit hard in the beginning.
And also to make it feel safe for everybody else. If somebody doesn't have their camera on, they don't know where that person is. So who's be listening in on them? You know, where are they? Are they, you know, in a cafe or whatever? You know, so we have to know that the people in the group are in a private, safe space.
And that's important for the facilitators as well, to know that everybody's safe in the group.
Yeah. Answered that one. Answered that one. Okay. Yeah, exactly, Jill. Okay. Any other questions from people? How often are we planning to run the groups?
So the answer to that is we don't know. This is our first group. We're looking at it like a pilot group, in the sense that we need to learn from it as well as and think about it and think about what works, what doesn't, what works better, and how it was for you. I mean, I really see it going forward, and I you know, but once we get this done, then we'll be able to kind of knit it into our other services and see where it fits and see how often it can run.
I think as well, Harry, if you don't mind me jumping in on this, we're really keen for people who do come along to the first run through. We're really keen to hear from them on their experience of it as well. Because as Kathy's saying, it's a little bit uncharted. Not in the sense that, I mean, Bodywhys have so much experience running these groups, but this is a different type of one. So we're really keen to hear from people who do join and hear about their experiences, so we can learn from that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I suppose, and for this first group as well, Kathy and I will be there in the background for the group as well, and Neve. We'll be there. The three of us will be there in the background, just learning and, you know, keeping an eye and helping, and so we'll be there as well. Any other questions? if people don't have questions now, that's absolutely fine. If you do think of a question after the webinar, you can email us and we will answer.
And
Has
I
any,
suppose
yeah, sorry, go
I was
on.
just going to say, practically speaking, what we'll do is we'll have the registration form up next week. I'm on the REConnect page, and that's the way if you want to express interest in the group and be part of the group, then you register that way through Niamh, and nearer the time we'll send you out a Zoom link for the 6 sessions and all the other bits and pieces, but that's the registration will be up next week.
Yeah. And Barry has just asked, has anything like this happened in another area of mental health? Has there been, Niamh, are you aware of any other social connections group like this in any other area?
There is some colleagues of us that work with us in Australia have an intervention that kind of is a general loneliness. They do different applications, but specifically, I don't think focusing on peer support and informed in this way by people with lived experience. I think this, I'm very hesitant to say it's the absolute first, but I think it's one of the first, yeah.
And as Pauline says, loneliness is such a huge part of being disconnected. Absolutely. And Dara says, thank you and best of luck with it. Jill says, sorry, just to clarify, the registration doesn't open up today. It'll be next week, just with limited spaces. Want to clarify this. Do you want to say that again about registration, Kathy?
So the registration form we'll have up on the website next week, ideally Monday.
Yeah. And Elaine, no, absolutely, there's no cost. All of our services are free.
Oh yeah, we don't even think of saying that because we don't think of it, you know, because of course they're all free. Yeah.
Okay. So will we leave it there then? I think we've covered everything and answered all the questions. So just let me thank Niamh, Kathy and Emmy one more time for talking us through the new service. We're all really excited about it, and yeah, we hope to really have this embedded in our services in the near future. So thank you all for coming today, and thank you for those who attended the webinar today. And yeah, wishing you all the best.